Hello and welcome. I am Ben the Best 5 and I'm coming at you with yet more Kerbal Space Program content. Now, to start off this episode, we are in fact inside mission control, and I'm just going to show you something that I touched on briefly last episode, but I kind of expanded on it a little bit since then. So previously we had this planter flag on Minmus in good faith that soon we would have an Explore Minmus contract, which has appeared here and I've gone accepted. However, I've also received a scientific data from space around Minmus, as well as on the surface of Minmus, and we can go and quite easily pick those up while we're, going to Minmus and landing on it. So, as a result, I've accepted those, and I'm going to make sure that I tick those off, just because it means completing 4 contracts with 1 mission means that we can bring back a lot more money, which means that we can expand stuff later and potentially build more expensive rockets later on, or who knows. So here we are launching our mission, which will take our Kerbals to the surface of Minmus. Now I am going to start pointing our craft slightly south as soon as we take off and start performing our gravity turn. We want to get that to about 12 degrees because that's at the same, would then be at the same inclination as Minmus. So as a result, we will in fact start to burn that way as part of our gravity assist, so that we are launched into an orbit which is slightly inclined and off center, which will then allow us to minimize our burn when we have to head for our inclination change, or reduce or remove the need for an inclination burn entirely, which would be optimal. Yes. Now, this stage that you see here, this solid rocket booster stage, there'd be no point ever trying to recover such a stage, because you'd receive almost no value from recovering it. And that upper stage there you see, which is liquid fuel, I do have plans to recover some liquid fuel stages in the future. However, I don't have the parts unlocked in this particular save to perform such a recovery of an upper stage. I may, if I can land this thing on Minmus and collect all the science from it, I'll then use that to unlock the parts required to perform a upper stage recovery, so that if it would be worth it, we could perform an upper stage recovery of a rocket, and just simply do that to increase the number of funds that we can recover from a mission. Although an upper stage recovery, most times, even on my save, which I did my earlier first series on, I could have probably started to recover some stages then. However, a lot of the times it wasn't worth it, just simply because they were either too far away to safely recover without over designing it, or there was simply not enough left in the stage, like just a single poodle engine, which is relatively cheap, and an empty fuel tank, which by the time you added the heat shield required, as well as the parachutes and stuff, as well as the probe core, it wouldn't be worth it. So therefore, I haven't performed an upper stage recovery yet on this channel. So you might, depending on how this goes, and particularly this stage does have some more fuel tanks, so if it was only going to somewhere like low Earth orbit, or low Kerbin orbit, or if it got something like a free return trajectory from Minmus, depending on where it landed on Kerbin, because obviously where you land alters the value of recovery. However, if you could land it in a reasonably useful position, it would potentially be worth it if you recovered an upper stage from a rocket, such as the Atlas here, even though its lower stages are not worth recovering, just simply because they are empty solid rocket booster spheres, well, not spheres, cones, just cylinders, empty cylinders which used to have solid rocket booster fuel in them. However, they have nothing in them anymore, so there's no value in them and no point trying to recover them. That was a mouthful. Anyway, this stage will take a while to circularize. However, we have ample time to do so before it hits the atmosphere again. And although the regular Atlas rocket will use a skipper, yes, it was a skipper main engine in its second stage, in order to maximize the amount, well, to basically take larger payloads to orbit. This version here is in fact using a pivotal engine, which is slower, and it cuts down on the potential payload it could carry to orbit before it started to re-enter. However, with it like this, it means that there is in fact more fuel left over in the stage, so if the rocket was launching something which wasn't at the full 25 kilogram capacity of the rocket, it was something a bit smaller like this capsule, which doesn't weigh quite the 25 tons, I think it's 17 tons. Because of that, I can in fact give it a smaller upper stage engine. See, it was able to successfully circularize our orbit here. So yes, by giving it the less powerful engine, it's put more fuel in the engine, which means that we can now use our engine as second stage or upper stage, to perform some of the burn which would bring us into a Minmus which would bring us to a Minmus flyby. Basically, by doing this, I'm able to have enough fuel left over in the stage to use the second stage to perform our trans-Minmus injection burn, and then once we've performed our trans-Minmus injection burn, we can in fact ditch the stage and then use our capsule, the fuel in our capsule, to circularize and land and complete the mission contracts that we have and do other cool stuff like that. Now, gauging by the amount of fuel left in it right now, and given how far Minmus is and how much an average Minmus injection burn costs, I don't think we'll quite be able to perform our entire injection burn using this stage. However, we should probably get close enough that it will have saved us a lot of fuel and reduce the fuel requirements. And we'll have made the change between a skipper engine and a poodle engine worth it. Oop, too far. Now here I'm creating a maneuver node to bring us to Minmus orbit, and the goal here is to just get some kind of a Minmus encounter and then fine tune it so that our orbit will transect Minmus's orbit in a useful position, and I was able to there pull our orbit around until we got to a reasonably useful intersect. And here I'm just going to fine tune our maneuver so that we can get close to the surface of Minmus from our initial burn, so that we can circularize nice and close to the surface of the planet, just simply because circularizing close to the planet cuts down the delta V requirements. However, if you circularize far away, it means that your orbit will require more delta V to be expended to land on the surface. It will also expend more delta V trying to trying to get into an orbit, and it also means that you will have to spend more delta V in order to more delta V to get yourself on a to get back home from Minmus after you've performed the mission. So once you're up in orbit after doing the mission, if you're in a low Minmus orbit, I mean, for bodies like Minmus it doesn't matter quite as much as something larger like, say, Tylo, because you'll always end up, it's so small that the effect is minimal. However, for somewhere like Minmus, when you're trying to get back, having Minmus be nice and close, or being close to Minmus, very much optimizes your chances of, optimizes the delta V expenditure of getting to Minmus, or getting from Minmus to Kerbin, because I'm rambling here, aren't I? Yeah. Basically, I'm just trying to set up a maneuver node, and Minmus is being quite difficult to get to. Now, the best kind of encounter I could get from here was at about 33 kilometers, which is, not great for an encounter, but I would have preferred something around the 10 to 15 mark. However, given just how difficult it was to get to this particular point and to get an encounter, this good comparatively compared to what else was on offer, I decided I'd just go for a planned 33 kilometer inclinate periapsis, and if I could optimize if I can optimize it while I'm burning, then I will do so. Just because, a nice and close encounter, it's always useful. I feel like I've said that too many times so far. So yes, this burn will take quite a while. Well, not quite a while actually. Well, the burn, it's going to be over a minute. However, it's going to be fine. Sometimes when I'm in a really low orbit, because I nearly put myself into like a 70 kilometer orbit, and my periapsis was quite low at almost 70 kilometers. So when your orbit's like that, it can be a bit of a problem. If you have a burn more than about 15 seconds, your periapsis can drop down, and it can end up re-entering by mistake. However, that is not going to be an issue with this particular burn, so we're going to be fine, particularly since I was burning prograde, and I am burning a little bit radial in and a little bit radial out, which could have done it even though I was burning prograde. However, the amounts are so insignificant, and I was burning near my apoapsis anyway, so there wasn't much risk of re-entering and hitting Kerbin's atmosphere, which is great. Alright, we're just finishing off our last of our burn. I'm going to follow that that maneuver. I'm going to do my best to follow it. The best that we can. And I'm going to, as you can see there, I in fact burned slightly past Minmus. So I'm going to burn in the opposite direction, which is predominantly retrograde. So I'm just going to hold retrograde and burn along it for a little bit. And that should hopefully bring me to a Minmus encounter, because I did have one previously. However, I burned past it. There we go. We have a Minmus encounter. It's not a very good one though, so I'm going to try and use my radial in and radial out markers to try and burn to get a closer encounter. Alright, I've used the in and out as much as I can, and because burning towards radial in has stopped working, that gives me a fair indication that I've probably gone past an ideal spot, which means I want to start to burn slightly prograde again, which was correct. However, I've gone past that, so I need to burn retrograde again. Now this is really fiddly. I am giving it less than a second of throttle, and the throttle is being set at almost nothing, so alright, we have a ridiculously close Minmus encounter, which is too close for comfort, because as it shows there, we are going to fly straight through Minmus's mountains, which would destroy the entire crew, which is not something that we want. However, we can in fact, because we are on a near polar orbit, we can just use our marker to burn towards the south pole of Minmus to raise our periapsis to stop ourselves from colliding with the surface. Now at this point here, I will now create a planned maneuver node to bring us to a Minmus orbit after we've made an encounter. A nice and low Minmus orbit, which will be nice and optimized for us to get into orbit from. Oh no, don't tell me we're going the long way again. Well, looks like Kerbal Space Program has in fact showed me an encounter which is in fact in 2 orbits time, which is, well, risky business because the Mun can very much like to get in the way and ruin your orbits. However, it looks like we're going to be fine because we in fact moved very fast and shot straight past the Moon's sphere of influence and did not get an unwelcomed orbital assist from it, which is excellent. Now, I'd also like to point out that by getting nice and close to our target here, which is Minmus, we have in fact got a rather small orbital insertion burn. As it stands, it's at less than 200, which, I mean, for Minmus, I mean, your insertion burn will always be pretty small because Minmus is quite small. However, because we weren't going up past, our insertion burn is quite low like this for a couple of reasons. Reason number one is that we did not go very much far past the we didn't go far past Minmus's orbital height from Kerbin, and the second thing is bringing ourselves nice and close to a nice and close Minmus orbit has in fact reduced our requirement for burning to get to Minmus, and in fact now we are in Minmus orbit with a nice and healthy 2000 meters of delta V to bring ourselves down to the surface. In fact, 2000 meters of delta V is quite excessive compared to the amount of delta V required to orbit a place like, well, sorry, to land on a place like Minmus, just because it has a very, very small sphere of influence and a very small gravitational pull, which means it won't cost us much to land on it at all. Now what you can see I'm doing here is I'm in fact just time warping around the planet. I'm in fact waiting until an ideal landing site is in fact underneath our orbit so that we can land on it, and for it to be, you know, at least slightly illuminated, just simply because yeah, you don't want to land on the dark side of a planet because, well, or in this case a moon, because that makes it unnecessarily more difficult. Although that being said, there's not really many places on Minmus that you can burn which aren't particularly ideal, just because the entire planet is generally incredibly flat. So here I am going for a landing on one of Minmus's flats, as you can see there. However, before we do that, remember one of our contracts in fact said go and get some science from space around Minmus. So we are in fact going to do an experiment above, which was an EVA report, and we're going to enter it into the, just like that, and from there we can in fact complete one of our contracts, which will bring us more very useful funds later on for completing said contract. Alright, just over these mountains here is where we are going to land, and as you can see we are moving very slowly, so and we have a very high thrust to weight ratio, particularly with this craft here, as in our thrust to weight ratio at the moment is up over 30, which is a bit ridiculous, so killing off our velocity will not be difficult even slightly. Now, I would like to kill off our velocity here so that we start falling straight down, just so that we can in fact make sure we land in this part here, not over there, because those are slightly mountainous, and slightly mountainous terrain is definitely not ideal for landing. Because it's Minmus, it should be fine. However, I do like to usually be a bit safer than sorry, particularly since I do care about, my Kerbal's state of being, keeping them alive and not in critical danger. So as a result, I'm just performing that there to make sure that we can lower ourselves down painfully slowly to the surface of Minmus. This bit here I'm gonna speed up, just simply because, well, there's nothing much really to see here except for a craft slowly, ever so painfully slowly descending towards the surface of Minmus, with no time warp available. And here we are, successfully, safely touched down on the surface of Minmus as the sun is literally setting behind the mountain over there. So now that we are on Minmus, we will in fact perform some science, and for this particular mission I have in fact unlocked the deployable science, as you can see there in that box. So I will in fact set up a small station, and the reason I brought a pilot, an engineer and a scientist is simply because I want to set up and optimize a station. Oh sorry, ground station, yeah. As you can see there, we've in fact given our engineer Kerbal the solar panel, because he is going to set that up, because him setting that up will in fact maximize its effect, and since he is in fact level 1 and deploying it, it will in fact provide enough power for 2 different units instead of just the one. Yep, see, 2, which is very important because we in fact have 2 different units which we are going to be deploying. There is in fact no need for RCS jetpacks on the surface of Minmus when descending, just simply because it has, well, almost no gravity. So, and here is our scientist who is going to deploy our science experiment, simply because when scientists deploy a science experiment it will in fact yield more science, and we can finally let Jeb here go out on an EVA. He can in fact take the last module, the command module basically, and use that to start up the station. We'll also let our brave pilot Kerbal plant a flag and complete yet another one of our contracts, while our Kerbals are all here on EVA as well. it would also be a good idea to perform an EVA report to get us more science and to scan the horizons for any features that might be pick-upable, which we could use to gain even more science. Things such as rocks, for example. Now I can't immediately see anything. There are a couple of glimmers over here on the edge, one there, so those might be worth checking out. We'll send Jeb over to see if he can pick one of those up for some extra science. Yes, that does look like these are in fact items which can be picked up, which we have spotted over the horizon. Or they might be too big to pick up. We might in fact require a rover. Look, we've shot past one, but that doesn't matter, because we can in fact come over here and try and pick up this one, which looks identical. And we can roll a bit because, you know, Kerbals in fact can do that and be perfectly fine. Take a surface sample, can't forget to do that, very important, worth lots and lots of science. And come over here to hopefully pick up a piece of sandstone worth quite a significant amount of science. Yep, 150, which is the same as a surface report. Now there's not much point in going to investigate that piece over there because it will in fact be the same. So as a result, I'm just going to fly past it and head straight back to the ship and then bring our Kerbals all the way back home with the invaluable science that we have taken from our mission. We also need to remember to plant a flag, just simply because we in fact have a mission to do that. And it would be very poor form if we in fact went to Minmus and did not complete all available contracts. So yes, Jeb here can in fact plant a flag when he stops moving. There we go. And that's another contract set for completion. We can in fact also now start taking our Kerbals back to the pod because, well, they've completed all of their mission objectives. We just need to make sure that we send one of them through to collect some of the science which wasn't collected earlier, and then we need to make sure that they can all get back into their pods safely, ready to transfer themselves back to Kerbin. Oh, wrong side. Oh well. So yes, we have in fact collected all the science from our capsule and deployed the base, which means that now all we need to do is send our Kerbals back into the thing and yeah, go home. This next bit will be sped up. Alright, our Kerbals are all inside the pod, which means it's in fact time for us to blast off back into space. Now the thing about Minmus is it has absolutely no atmosphere, so as soon as you are clear of the craters surrounding the area in which you have landed, you can in fact start to then turn around and begin your circularization. Now we're going to move up to our apoapsis, which is, well, rather high considering we were only burning for a couple of seconds. However, this is not particularly a worry for us because well, we have excess fuel, and we don't need to be specifically precise. We just need to get ourselves to an orbit which will stop us from crashing back down into the surface of Kerbin. From here on in, we want to set up a maneuver to send us back into Kerbin and bring our Kerbals home, finally. Even though they've been in space for a month, so yes, I think these Kerbals are very much ready to head home. There we go, we have an intersect at Kerbin. Well, we are going to intersect Kerbin, meaning we're going to crash into it, which is great if we're trying to get back home. We do not need to worry about crashing, just by the way, because Kerbin has an atmosphere and we have parachutes. I don't feel like this needs to be said, but I'm just going to say it anyway. Plus we have a heat shield to stop our souls from burning up during re-entry, which is, well, to say the least, a good idea. Okay, we are now going to bring ourselves back to Kerbin, so we can in fact time warp our way along our orbit until we are about to hit Kerbin. From there we can in fact detach the bits that which we no longer need, for example our engine and our now expended science units, and bring those back with us to Kerbin. And it looks like we are in fact going, because we are ended up on a very polar orbit of Kerbin from a very polar orbit of Minmus. It looks like we're going to land either on or very close to the Antarctic of Kerbin, which will be pretty cool because you don't normally end up landing someplace like that. So you're landing there for a change. Interesting. Now we're going to hit Kerbin's atmosphere very aggressively, so to make sure that our Kerbals in fact do make it back alive, we're going to have to be quite careful indeed to make sure that we hit with our heat shield facing towards the bit which will receive the majority of the impact. However, the heat shields in this game are very, very powerful and strong, so we should not have much of a problem dealing with the effects of re-entry. Don't worry about that shaking, that was just the debris you saw fly past there of our service module which we detached exploding. Alright, we have successfully re-entered and are through Kerbin's atmosphere, and we can now deploy our parachutes and lower ourselves down somewhere into the Antarctic of Kerbin. Realistically, this would not be an ideal place to land, just simply because getting a boat here to pick up the crew after they landed would definitely be a bit of a challenge. However, this is Kerbal Space Program, they can in fact pick them up from anywhere. Plus this is also Kerbal Space Program, they wouldn't need to use something like a boat. They can in fact probably just build a really big helicopter and just send that down to pick them up. Maybe a plane, who knows. But a helicopter would probably be easier. In the real world they tried a helicopter once but it didn't work out, so they've never tried it again to recover capsules. Alright, we have touched down, so now we can go ahead and recover our Kerbals. Alright, here we are with a massive scientific payload from travelling to Minmus and performing a lot of experiments and bringing the data back with us. We recover almost nothing from it. However, we bring our crew back and they in fact receive some XP, which is great, always useful. thank you for watching. I am Ben the Best 5. I guess I should say that. Maybe I shouldn't. Who knows? Anyway, thank you for watching. Please do leave a like if you like the video, and please do subscribe. And thank you for watching.